Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the end of your testimony, Mr. Taibbi, it says, no wonder your approval ratings are lower than psoriasis. By the way, I've had a few bouts of it. It's nasty stuff. And you said you sold us out. Explain what you were saying at the end of your testimony.
Many of the programs, thank you for the question, Mr. Congressman. Many of the programs that Michael and I reported on in the Twitter files, these are taxpayer-funded programs that are being spent to remove the speech of the taxpayers themselves or to encourage platforms to take down content of the taxpayers. And I think most people would disagree with that allocation of resources. I'm hearing a lot about Elon Musk. Does that mean that I should be in favor of the Department of Homeland Security partnering with Stanford University to do a mass flagging program ahead of the 2020 election where the speech of ordinary citizens was taken down? These are two completely separate issues, but it's the institutional problem. We've created all these institutions. The Global Engagement Center is one, a counter-misinformation program, the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. These are all big institutions that are part of the government that are directed towards this exact activity, and it has to be shut down in order for us to get back to an absolutely free press environment.
On March 9th, 2023, I believe you were in this building testifying, and the IRS knocked on your door. Give us a retrospective, if you could do it kind of briefly. I've got other questions here. Give me a retrospective as you look back on that incident 2 years ago.
Yeah, I came back from testifying before this committee. On the train, my wife told me that the IRS had left a note on my door. They had knocked while I was testifying. This, again, is why I'm finding it funny that people are suddenly concerned about the harassment of journalists. I don't remember any of you saying anything when this happened at the time.
You think it's a coincidence?
We subsequently learned, thanks to Mr. Chairman Jordan, who reached out to the Treasury, that case was opened on me on December 24th, 2022, when probably the most consequential Twitter files report that I dropped was published. It was a Saturday and it was Christmas Eve. I don't think the IRS is usually working that day.
Ms. Subramanya, in regards to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, might it be useful if the liability shield that is currently in place be conditioned on companies to make sure that they adhere to a free speech standard? Do you think there maybe should be changes made to Section 230 to make sure that free speech is protected?
I'm not familiar with this legislation. What is the liability shield?
Mr. Schellenberger, would you like to take that question?
Sure, and I've testified in front of the Senate and written a white paper on this issue. I think that Section 230 should be reformed if you're going to offer this sweeping liability protection. Then I think that adult users of social media platforms should be able to choose and filter their own legal content. And I've said that publicly quite a bit before. I haven't found a lot of interest in either party for that proposal, but I do think that's the best way. Certainly you can still have a feed that the social media platforms choose to feed you, but I do think there should be that option for people to choose their own content.
You say in your testimony PSYOP tactics being used by the US and UK military against the American people. That is really scary stuff reading that. Could you elaborate? Because I think the American people need to hear, they need to hear about this.
Yeah, we now know what happened, which is that basically after the war on terror, the United States used counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, counterpopulism tactics first in the Middle East as part of the Arab Spring uprisings, then in the Eastern Europe as part of the color revolutions, using social media to foment revolutions against places that we wanted regime change, and then using censorship in places to repress conflicting opinion in places that we were trying to stabilize. Those tactics were then turned against the American people after the populist revolutions of 2016. First, you saw Russiagate, the idea, this wild conspiracy theory that President Trump was somehow controlled through a sex blackmail operation by the Russians. But then we also saw a very elaborate effort to do exactly what they had done abroad, creating small committees of experts to decide what the truth was and demand censorship on the basis of it. But I also mentioned there's also these proactive influence operations, the most dramatic of which is the Hunter Biden laptop, severely illegal, but we also saw the mobilization of the intelligence community. And now in the latest article that we published today, we have documented that the Agency for International Development has overseen basically a takeover over the last decade and a half of independent investigative journalism in Europe and around the world through OCCRP and supposedly independent journalism organizations with an eye to basically controlling the information and controlling the major news media that do investigative journalism.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the work that you have done over the last couple Congresses on this issue.
We appreciate it. Gentleman yields back.